Hi, thanks for joining me and welcome back to the channel. So today's video we're going to be talking about this Sonny Rollins Way Out West in stereo, the brand new Analogue Productions UHQR release. Now I've done a video on this album before, not so long ago. I'll put a link up here, and in that video I was talking about this, which is the Craft Recordings Contemporary Records Acoustic Sounds series. It's quite a mouthful, isn't it? The Craft Recordings Contemporary Records Acoustic Sounds series. Now this was cut from the original analog master tapes by Bernie Grundman and pressed onto 180 grams vinyl at RTI. So, you know, Acoustic Sounds, this is obviously inspired by, managed, I don't know, overseen by Chad Kassem at Acoustic Sounds and Analogue Productions. Chad owns both companies, so you'll see the sort of you know, familiar logo on both. Okay, but this was, as I say, I covered this not so long ago, and the first version I ever had of this music on vinyl is this here, and you'll notice a subtle difference to the cover. That's the original stereo cover, Sonny Rollins Way Out West in stereo. And this is the original cover, Sonny Rollins Way Out West. Now this one here, this is a 2009 reissue of a 1988 Phil Delancey remaster. Now, and this is on the Original Jazz Classics label. Now, Original Jazz Classics is now owned by Craft Recordings, and Original Jazz Classics now are quite different to what they were. And, you know, I think Original Jazz Classics are effectively pretty much the same as this, and very, very, very good. All cut from the original analog master tapes. I think mostly by Kevin Gray, or exclusively by Kevin Gray. I'm not entirely certain. Kevin's got an all analog cutting system, so you know, there's old OJCs and there's new OJCs, and you don't want to get them too confused. Now, as I said in the previous video, this it's got quite a different sort of sound to it. It's very clean. It sounds very kind of 80s. I would, you know, you could almost wonder whether it's digital, but I don't think in 1988 that, you know, digital mixing, mastering was really a thing. So I'm pretty sure this is all analog, but it's it does sound different to the other two, quite notably different. But if this is the only version you've got, or the only version you can afford, or the only version you can find, I think it's still well worth having, because Way Out West is just one of those records it's just joyous and fun and uplifting, and, you know, the whole thing, it's I mean, one of the sort of recurring kind of themes throughout, you know, song after song. It's not the same kind of, exactly the same rhythms, but you've got Shelly Manne on drums, and he's almost doing the old clippity-clop kind of coconut shells type of thing to sort of, you know, set the scene of cowboys and, you know, horses and sitting around a campfire. It's absolutely, it's beautiful, wonderful music. So whatever version, even if it's on CD, it's you know, as Norman Maslow would say, it's the music, stupid, and the music here is just stunning. Now, I did say about this is quite interesting, Sonny Rollins Way Out West, just like that, versus the in stereo. And the thing about this is, you know, the original of this was this was recorded in 1957 for Contemporary Records, and the original release was in stereo and in mono, but the in stereo was only available on reel-to-reel tape, because in 1957 the only way you could experience stereo was on reel-to-reel tape. Stereo vinyl hadn't been developed yet. Okay, that actually came a year later in 1958. So the original of this album was mono on vinyl. Okay, and the original stereo release of this was actually 1958. There was a stereo version in 57, but only on reel-to-reel tape. Okay, so that's a kind of slightly confusing thing, and actually I think it's you know, this cover is technically wrong for the stereo version. It was, you know, very much released in stereo because stereo at the time was brand spanking new. Now, I want to say something else before I really get into the sound quality of these different versions about the stereo of this. Now, this is, as I've just explained, it's extremely early stereo, and you really have got left and right, and their mixing desk was, I think it was a passive mixing desk that had, you know, these days a mixing desk, you look at a typical, you know, an SSI desk, it might have 48 channels wide, so to speak, or 96 even, but like on each channel you've got, you know, your level slider, and then you might have 30 different other adjustments of slopes and EQs and filters and, you know, this, that and the others, and that the signal path going through that mixing desk is just enormous. Okay, and I think this is all really relevant to this record, and basically the staggering fidelity and joy of it. So the original recording was so direct, okay, and this is what we'll really come on to when we get to the UHQR, but it is very much ping pong left right stereo. So in the left channel you've got Sonny Rollins on his saxophone, okay, fully hard left. On the right channel you've got Shelly Manne on drums and Ray Brown on bass, and again they are very hard right. Now, some people hate that, I know, I fully appreciate that, and we've discussed that on this channel many a time. I mean, from, you know, the Beatles Revolver and them using AI to sort of, you know, remix something, and I just don't agree, I don't approve. This is, you know, this is how it was recorded, that was what went down in the studio, and when you really hear it, which we'll get to with the UHQR in a minute, when you really hear it, your hairs will be on end, your skin will be covered in goose pimples, you'll have tears in your eye and just joy and love in your heart, because you are so there with the musicians at that time, you know, March 1957, just laying down this groove. It's staggering, and that immediacy and that simplicity of the signal path from microphone to tape, it's, you know, that it can't kind of be beaten. You know, more modern productions, even a year or two more, the mixing desks got more complex. It all of this, it's another thing in between you and the performance, and if you really love the art of music and the you know, real musicians playing real instruments, and the difference between musicians and feeling their passion, their skill, you know, the years and years of practice, their experience, feeling all that rather than some bloody piece of AI computer generated rubbish. You know, this will set your heart on fire. You know, it's amazing stuff. It's amazing stuff. So if you don't like ping pong stereo, get this in mono, okay? But I'm going to get now down to talking about the three different versions and the sound quality. So we'll start off with I'm going to start off, this is typically how I do my listening actually. I'll start off with one, and I'll work my way through, and then I'll work my way back, so that you kind of have an A, B, C, C, B, A at least. So I'm going to start off with the OJC. And as I kind of hinted at earlier, the recording itself is phenomenal. So it doesn't matter what version of this you get, it sounds wonderful, and the music is wonderful, and I just can't deny. And until I got the other two copies, I loved this record. I still love this record actually, but you know, this one has actually sat in my out pile since I bought that. But me and my out pile are you know, it grows ever bigger, and I don't actually ever get round to selling anything. That's sort of how that works, much to my wife's distress, but there we go. So this is just phenomenal. Now it is, there's one interesting thing on this, and because it's not remixed, I'm not entirely certain how he's done it, but I think he's just sort of bled a little bit of the channels together. But the bass on this is actually pulled in, so you've got hard left, you've got Sonny Rollins, kind of mid right, centre right, you've got Ray Brown on bass, and hard right, you've got Shelly Manne on drums. And you know, the music's the same, it's beautiful, it's rounded. This is a little bit more kind of etched, and like I say, you could almost be forgiven for thinking it was digitally mastered or digitally mixed or on CD. It's super clear, and it's, you know, it does the job. It gives you that music, but that's, you know, that's where we're going to leave this one. Okay, now we get to the Craft Recordings Contemporary Records Acoustic Sounds series release. What a mouthful. This came out in only last year, in 2024, and this is cut by Bernie Grundman from the original Analogue tapes. Now, Bernie Grundman's first job in the industry was at Contemporary Records. I'm not sure in what year exactly. I would think it was probably the 60s. And but Contemporary Records at the time, it was started by Lester Koenig. Lester died in 77 and his son took over. But, you know, before then, because I'm sure that Bernie's, you know, worked with Lester, Bernie was working there at Contemporary. And so there's kind of, you know, of the modern sort of top flight A-list and mastering engineers, there is absolutely no question in this case that I think Bernie was the best person to give this to. And he's cut an amazingly beautiful, sensitive and wonderful record. And how this one differs from this one is it just sounds more natural and more analog. And as I say, I think this is analog, but this sounds more analog, more natural, less processed. And as I say, that, you know, the soundstage on the OJC is altered slightly, which is, you know, clearly the more you do to something, the more veils, the more detachment you create, so to speak. So this one has got, you know, a beautiful musical flow. Now I've got to say, this is only $30. I bought mine from the Acoustic Sounds website, and for $30 this is an absolute steal. It's a no-brainer. It is astonishingly good value for money. There's no question about it. The UHQR, which we're about to get to, is $150, which is a lot of money for a record. There's no denying it. But this, for $30, if you know, assuming you can't afford $150 for the UHQR, this is just 100% recommendable. It is phenomenally good. Okay, and when you put this on in isolation before you hear the other one, you're kind of thinking, how much better can this sound? Okay, now just to really kind of, how does it sound different to this? As I say, it's kind of more analog, it's more natural, it's less in your face, it is less sort of starkly clear, if you like. It is more rounded, but it's got a much more sort of musical flow and bounce and swing to it, and it's just better. But it is more ping pong left right, because as I say, that the bass is fully in the right hand channel along with the drums, unlike this one, which sort of pulls it a little bit towards the center. So a thoroughly recommended record, and for the money it's a no-brainer. And of course, until the UHQR came out, it's sort of like just perfectly satisfying, and how can it get any better? Well, here we are, the UHQR. Now I'm just going to show you what you get for this, because as I said, this is $150. It's 5 times the price of the other one. Now the other one is pressed at RTI on 180 gram vinyl, and it's got a nice cover, and it's cut by Bernie Grundman. This one is also cut by Bernie Grundman. So there's a lot of similarities, and then there's some differences. Now, first of all, of course, this one is 45 RPM, so it's cut onto 2 discs. Okay, so you've got twice as much cutting time, twice as much pressing time, twice as much material, and all the rest of it. So if everything were equal, this could be $60 at least, okay? If everything were equal. The other thing about this is it's cut onto Clarity vinyl, which is significantly quieter vinyl, and that really does have an effect on the listening experience of this, because it is such sparse and clean and just wonderfully clear music, that the fact that it's cut onto Clarity vinyl makes a big difference. So again, we can pump the price up again, and let's say, you know, we're now justifying $100 for the record, for argument's sake. Okay, the cover is really beautifully produced. It's a Stoughton jacket. It's got a lovely matte finish. It's good, solid, really stiff, hard cardboard. It is a gatefold, which was, I believe, the original wasn't, but you've got a lovely picture of Sonny Rollins here, and you've got some nice sleeve notes by John Koenig there. Okay. Now, what else do you get? You get a very interesting booklet, liner notes by John Koenig and Bernie Grundman. Okay. There's some really nice pictures. I haven't actually read this yet, but we've got Art Pepper over there. Now, there's Art Pepper was another one of the contemporary artists, and we've got Art Pepper meets the rhythm section is the other UHQR that was released at the same time as this, which I have bought. So that will be a forthcoming video. Okay. I must admit, I kind of looked through this looking to see if there's any pictures of a very young Bernie Grundman, but I couldn't see anything. Oh, Ornette Coleman, he was another one that worked briefly on contemporary. There's Shelly Manne, the drummer. Here we got Shelly Manne and Ray Brown, the bass player. Roy Dunan is the engineer who I think came to them from Capitol, but it's, you know, as I say, the sound of this, the recording of this, when I get on to talk about the music in this thing is staggeringly good. Okay. Anyway, you got a really nice booklet, and you know, as is normal with the UHQRs, you've got a, you know, technical spec manual and a catalogue of other, you know, of other titles, and you've got a certificate here which shows that there's only 2,750 of these made, and you know, I've got one numbered in the 200s. So, you know, this is a very exclusive kind of, you know, handmade thing. And the point about, you know, the price and all that sort of stuff, yeah, it's 5 times the price, but you know, with this here, you know, it's, if you think of this as, I don't know, a Porsche 911 or a Ferrari F40 or something like that, you know, Porsche 959 maybe a better, you know, at the time, £200,000 cars or something, that were kind of like the best you could get. I think you could kind of equate that with this. You know, this is, in comparison, this is like your McLaren F1, you know, 5 times the price at £1 million, but took a vast amount of extra care and attention to detail to produce. Because if you want to beat what is already the best, then you really have to pull out all the stops, and you have to pay for it. And quite frankly, You know, I mean, the weight of this package here is a darn sight more than 5 times the weight of this. You get what you pay for, and this is staggering, absolutely, utterly, staggeringly good. So, kind of giving the game away there to some degree, but how does this sound better? Compared with the, well, it sounds very, very, very similar, first of all, you know, compared with the, let's get this right, Craft Recordings Contemporary Records Acoustic Sounds series, cut by Bernie Grundman. You know, the UHQR by Analogue Productions, cut by Bernie Grundman, sounds very, very, very similar. But right from the word go, you've got this Clarity vinyl. The background is deathly quiet. It's as quiet as I've heard anything ever on vinyl. And when the, you know, the bass, the drums come in first of all, and then, you know, a couple of bars into the song, the sax comes in. It's just the actual being there-ness of those musicians, the absolute, you know, the bass as you know, Ray Brown's going up and down the fingerboard on his double bass. You know, you just hear absolutely everything. You hear every pluck, every movement, every note in exquisite detail. The body of the bass, the double bass, you can practically see it. You know, there may be other things, you know, other UHQRs or whatever that I've heard, or even ultra tapes for that matter, you know, that are possibly as good as this. But I even on tape, I'm not sure I've heard anything that's much better than this. It is staggeringly good. Possibly the closest vinyl to tape that I've ever heard. And the drums again, the drum, you know, whether it's the bass drum, the kick drum, the cymbals, the hi-hat, the snare, everything is just absolutely exquisitely there. They really, really, really are in the room with you. And the saxophone too. I mean, it's just it's staggeringly real. And there's you know, the occasional saxophone note where he really kind of plays a low note, and it almost feels like he's lifted up his sax to sort of pop the mouth of the horn over the head of the microphone. It's just so full of texture and immediacy and being there-ness. And I genuinely think that you would not get this if the mixing desk was more complex and the mixing process was more complex. And that's why I mean about this ping pong stereo. I don't mind it at all. It's of the time and it's of the era and it's how these were made. And whilst it's, you know, you don't have, it would have been nice to have, you know, maybe Sonny Rollins on the left and Ray Brown in the centre and Shelly Manne on the right, or, you know, I quite like actually having the drums off to one side and the bass in the middle, rather than the, you know, everything after, I don't know, mid-60s, everything had the drummer in the middle. You know, it just gets predictably boring almost. This is how it was recorded, and you hear more than you'll ever hear, and it is more real than you'll ever hear anything else. So I don't have a problem with that at all. It sounds phenomenal. And there are bits on, there's, you know, not too many, but there's bits on a couple of tracks where Ray Brown gets a bow and bows his bass, and it's the you know, and at times he does that in sort of harmony with these sort of lower kind of low guttural burping kind of saxophone notes, and it's just, what the hell is that? You are, honestly, I've never had the feeling from vinyl of being sat there in a recording session anywhere near as much as this record. It is staggeringly good. It's worth every penny, and I think you know, if it came out on ultra tape, I mean, I would have to buy it. I think it's stunning. I've actually got Saxophone Colossus, the tape project tape of that, which sounds amazing too. I mean, it really, really, really does. But these are, you know, these old contemporary recordings, They are very early stereo, and they're very naive stereo, but they are intensely real and intensely natural, and completely, you know, if you know, the microphone amplifier, the mixing desk, the cables, the tape recorder, the mastering, the mixing, everything, all these things, if the essence of that is capturing the music, the essence of that recording, this is where it's at. It hasn't been beaten. It's just everything afterwards is more detached, more processed, more managed. You know, it's like it's not more actually real. This is as actually real as you can get on vinyl. I think it's stunning. Anyway, so I think I pretty much covered this, but I'm gonna talk some numbers here, because I don't remember what I gave in terms of numbers, if I gave numbers, a score between these last time, but it doesn't really matter because the goalposts have been moved, haven't they? So remember what I said, this is a beautiful recording, okay? So, you know, even this OJC, I'd say, you know, musical wonderment, 100%. Sound quality of this, it's a really hard one. I think in contrast with the UHQR, I've got to kind of pitch it like 60%, but that's not really doing it justice. But I'm going to give it 60, okay? I'm going to give this 80 because it's way more natural and analog sounding. Even though the Phil Delancey OJC, I'm sure, is all analog, this one sounds a lot less processed, okay? And you really, I think this is the one where you really start to get into the groove and the swing and the feel of that recording and that session. But again, if you haven't got, you know, if you haven't got the UHQR money, so to speak, or if they've all sold out by the time you've saved up or whatever, this is a great record. And really 80% doesn't do it justice, but I've got to give it that because of the sonic differences and the absolute acid test of how close you feel to the recording. And this, it's got to be 100%. It's even amongst UHQRs, I can't think of another one where the UHQR process, because the recording itself in the first place is startling. So I can't think of one where the UHQR process actually does the justice to the recording as much as this does, because the recording is startlingly, incredibly, amazingly wonderful. I mean, it's 60, what is it, 67, 68, 69 years old? 67, 68 years old, this was, you know, this recording. And you are sat there with, you know, with the three musicians, more in the room than probably anything else you've ever heard, you know? It's stunning. Absolutely stunning. Anyway, I've got to say thanks to Chad for choosing to do this. Thanks to Bernie for doing such a staggeringly good job on it. You know, thanks in retrospect to Lester Koenig for starting Contemporary Records and getting Sonny Rollins into the studio. Thanks to Sonny Rollins for conceiving this amazing, wonderful, fun, you know, kind of way out west cowboy, you know, way out west. Before I heard this, was to me was a Laurel and Hardy film, and you know, one of the best Laurel and Hardy films. Well, this is one of the best jazz records too. It's beautiful, but like the Laurel and Hardy film, it's fun and it's joyful and it's kind of innocent and naive and beautiful, and just, it's staggering, 100%. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, please do leave a comment, hit the subscribe button. It all helps the channel immensely, and I'll look forward to seeing you all again soon. Bye now. Bye.